Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Sahara project update and overview. Thanks for your interest in Sahara. I'm very excited to be doing this presentation. It's probably the last time that I'm doing this one because I'm the former PTL of Sahara. I'm just covering for the current PTL who couldn't make it. So the plan today is just give a quick overview of what Sahara is, how it works, and talk about what we did in the Stein release and what we're gonna plan to do for the train release. So for those who don't really know what Sahara is a data processing service on OpenStack, and it aims to provide a way to deploy data processing clusters with a minimal effort from the user. And it also provides the capability to manage these clusters and also submit jobs to them. So Sahara works in a kind of a plugin-based services. And the plugins that we support nowadays are 3 Hadoop distributions, which is the vanilla Hadoop from upstream. We support Mapr distribution of Hadoop. We support the Cloudera one and the Hortonworks HDP with Ambari on that one as well. We have a support for Spark, only the vanilla distribution of Spark, and also we support Storm, which is more of a stream processing, but still on the same category. I'm going to give a little bit of a background on Sahara. We started Sahara in June, and for those who are kind of complicated to make the count, that was back in 2014. So it's been 5 years now since we had the first official release of Sahara. It's been worked on before that. In this last release, we had 19 contributors with Sahara, which may seem like a big number, but those are like really people who come and go just do one review or another. So active contributors, we only actually had 3. That was myself, the current PTL, Jeremy, and another contributor from Red Hat called Luigi. And we're actually trying to get people's attention to come back and contribute to Sahara because it is an important project for OpenStack, but we're not having that many help from the community to keep the project going and growing as fast as we want. Just a quick overview of how Sahara works and how we try to make things simpler for the user to deploy these clusters. Sahara works on a template-based system. So when a user tries to deploy Hadoop, Hadoop has so many services that needs to run on different machines and different groups of machines. And what we do is we created something called node group template that's going to set up the machines that are going to run specific services. So a normal setup of Hadoop, basic for a toy project, you usually have a master services and you have the slave nodes, right? On the master, usually run something like resource managers, node managers, and so on. And on the slaves, you actually run the things that you really run the worker services, the ones that actually do the processing and everything else. So on Sahara, you have to configure your node group templates the same way that you do for the way that you would deploy Hadoop manually. But instead of doing that manually, you just select, for example, I'm going to create a slave template, and this slave template, I'm going to put these services for running and some different service that you want to run. For example, if you want to run a data node manager or something else, then you can just create this template for the slave. And then you can create the master as well. And after that, you still need to create a cluster template. And what the cluster template is, it's basically a group of node group templates that you're going to put together. So the cluster template is going to say something like, I want to have 2 master nodes, and I want to have 5 slave nodes. And then you have a cluster template. And once you have the cluster template ready, you can just click Run, and Sahara is going to do the whole setup of the cluster. It's going to configure networks, going to configure the communication between the services and everything. And at the end, usually it depends on the size of the cluster, but usually takes about 4 or 5 minutes to have a whole cluster set up and running. So, and for those who have done Hadoop manually, you know that 4 or 5 minutes to set up a cluster is actually really good timing, because it usually took me a long time to have everything running and ready. So, and after you have the cluster ready, it doesn't mean much to have only the cluster ready. You actually need that cluster to do something for you. And you need to run jobs on it to get the output of those jobs. And Sahara actually provides a way for the user to deploy jobs on those clusters. We have something that we call elastic data processing, which is just a basic similar UI and also the CLI for deploying the jobs on Sahara. So we have data sources. Those data sources are just basically the places where the data are going to come from and where the data is going to be put at once the jobs are completed. We have job binary, which is basically a jar file that you want to execute on Hadoop. And you have a job template. And the job template does the same thing as the cluster template does, but it's for jobs. It's going to put together the data sources, the job binary, and it's going to execute the job on Sahara. This is a simple architecture of Sahara. This is not the real complex one. This is just most of an overview presentation kind of architecture. So as you can see, Sahara, we have a REST API in front of Sahara that allows us to have Horizon talking to the API. You can actually have the user contact directly this API or through CLI or anything. Sahara uses a bunch of different components of OpenStack to work nowadays. So we use Keystone to authenticate the users. We use Nova for creating the machines and getting the information from the machines. We use Glance to store the Hadoop images from, and Nova is going to get these images from Glance. And we use Swift as a data source place. So as I said, the data source is the place where the data is going to come from and put at. And you can use Swift to do that. We can have the data on Swift and output it to Swift as well. So what we did in Stein. Stein was a very interesting release for Sahara, because even though we only had 3 contributors, we managed to finish one of the biggest specs that we had on Sahara. So API v2 is now the official stable API of Sahara. And this work actually started about 3.5 years ago. So as I said, Sahara has been around for 5 years. So 3.5 years ago, we started working on API v2. That's when we actually saw that API v1 was not good enough, was complicated, was messy, and had a bunch of things that were out of place that we kind of ran to put it together to have a project released for OpenStack, and then we needed a new API. But it wasn't as simple as, say, we need a new API. That's not a simple work. We had a bunch of things to do to have that working, and we finally made it. And actually, API v2 opens up new possibilities, because we had new features added that we couldn't do on API v1. And also, API v2 now gives us the possibility for microversioning, which is going to facilitate adding new features to Sahara now without needing to have a major bump on the API version. And that's kind of a requirement for all OpenStack projects, that we keep backwards compatibility. And the API v2 is going to facilitate that, so improve the API without breaking backwards support. So we're really excited to have API v2. And also it's going to make things easier for maintainers, for users, for us as developers. And we're really happy that we managed to get that out of the way, and we're going to work on API v2 from now on. The other thing that we did for Stein, which was quite big, was having Python 3 for support, which for those who are involved in the community, you know that was one of the community goals for Stein release. Every project had to have Python 3 for support. And we made it. It was a little bit complicated in having so many dependencies on libraries and other projects to have it working, but we made it. Sahara is now compatible with Python 2 and Python 3 simultaneously, and it can actually work on an environment where your Sahara is running on Python 2 and the VMs are running only Python 3, or the other way around. It works Python 2 and Python 3 either way, which is really exciting. But we're going to remove Python 2 support soon, which is a goal that's going to come for next releases, but not right now. And the other feature that we did, and that one is actually the one that I was really excited about it, was removing the plugins code from Sahara Core. So as I said, Sahara works as a plugin-based system. So we have plugins for all the the data processing services that we run. So Mapart is a plugin on Sahara, Cloudera is another plugin, Spark is another plugin, and those used to live on the Sahara main code, which was a little bit easier for us to maintain because it was in 3 for us, but it was really, really hard for operators to maintain those on their clouds. So for example, we had Spark version 1.6 released in some of Sahara release, but then we had a new version of Spark. We had Spark 2.1. And if an operator wanted to upgrade his Spark version to 2.1, the only way to do that was to upgrade the whole OpenStack cloud, which is not, and we know that's not feasible for so many places. You had to wait for a long-term release from or something like that to upgrade. People didn't like the idea to have to upgrade every 6 months their entire cloud just to have a new version of a Sahara plugin. It didn't make sense. So the goal of this feature was removing the plugins code from the Sahara core. We were able to upgrade the plugins independently from the Sahara core, and the operators now can simply remove the library, which has the plugin version installed, 1.6 for example, and install the newest version of the plugin to have the Sahara 2.1 support. So that feature was really exciting for us, especially because we've really focused on making things easier for operators to have Sahara running on their cloud. And that feature actually accomplished a lot of that. For now, people are able to upgrade the plugins without having the effort to upgrade the whole cloud. So that thing was really exciting for us to have it done. And it took a lot of time, but we finally had it working. So this is kind of a graphic way to show what we did for Insta. So we focused a lot on manageability and user experience. That's the things that, especially with the split plugins, that where most of the time we were working on. But we also focus a little bit on resiliency, making Sahara really strong and not error-prone, not easily breakable, and modularity as well, because we're breaking the code into separate repos, and now it's easier for deployers to maintain Sahara and upgrade it when necessary. And for train, which is, I guess, the most exciting part of this talk, and what we're going to do now, one of the first things that we were trying to do is to have the full IPv6 support. That's a possible community goal, and we're not sure if that's going to be a community goal yet, but we're actually trying to get ahead and start working on this. We have to, one of the bugs that we had for a while now, it's the Python Spark job. So you can have Spark jobs as a jar file, but you can have Spark jobs as a .py file as well. And for those jobs, when they are using Swift data sources, right now it's broken because we actually have a script that kind of makes this connection. And we had some changes in Sahara, and also Spark had some changes on itself that our script's not working anymore. And we got a couple complaints because they were trying to run this Python Spark job with Swift and they're not working. And we know that's one of the main things that Sahara does. We run jobs on data processing clusters. We need to fix this. We didn't have the hands to work on it, but right now it's going to be one of our priorities to work on. So we're definitely going to try to fix that for train. Python 3 as default, again, one of the community goals. We're trying to have Python 3 as the primary Python version for Sahara. And the last thing that we're going to try to work on is Castellan integration. So bottom line is we have Castellan integration right now in Sahara, but we don't really have it. It was never properly tested. It was never, we never used ourselves. The people who worked on this integration are not working on Sahara anymore. So we don't really know the status of it. And we need to do a full test. We need to revisit this whole thing and make sure that this is actually working as it should. So it might not need too much work, but we definitely need to make sure that we document it properly and make it people know that we actually have Castellan integration for Sahara. And just kind of organizing the ideas. We're still focused on resilience. We're not that much focused on modularity this time because Sahara is already probably as split as it can be. We can't do any more modules on Sahara. We keep the manageability focus always pretty much because we know that we need to keep things improving for operation. And user experience is always something that we aim to improve and make things easier for everybody who's using Sahara to actually use it and come back to us with questions, and we can try to make Sahara every cycle a little bit easier and a little bit more user-friendly. Let's see, there is one last focus I want to talk about, that's security. We're focused on security, especially with this integration of Castellan, which is a key management system on OpenStack. So that's one of the focus for the Tring release, which is being led by Jeremy. And we're coming to a close on this talk, and we have 2 questions for people who are using Sahara or thinking about using Sahara, and they're interested in at all in Sahara, and we have those 2 questions. The first one is, which services would you like to see supported in Sahara? For us, who are developers, sometimes we don't have too much contact with people running Sahara in the real world itself. I used to, as I was a researcher, but I'm not anymore, so I'm not running anything at this moment. So we'd really like to hear from the community what you like to see running in Sahara, so we can study how we can do that, if it's possible for that to run on Sahara, and then we can actually prioritize it and actually make it happen. And the other thing is, for those people who are actually running Sahara, what are the main issues that you have hit while you're using Sahara? So what are the main pain points that we need to work on to make this more user-friendly and easier for people to get to use Sahara and invite new people to use Sahara as well? That's a way that making things easier for people to use, actually going to get new people using it. So that's a way to make the project growing from cycle to cycle. And are really close to an end in time. We have about 2 minutes. I would like to thank everyone who came, and we're open for questions if anyone has any questions. Yep, go ahead.
So I was just briefly looking at the Mari plugin support for Sahara, and we only see the support up to version 2.6 in Mari. So is there any plans to use newer versions of this distro?
Definitely. I didn't put it on the presentation, but every cycle we always look at the newest versions of the plugins, and we try to get Sahara to use the newest version available for at least 6 months. So we try not to go to the really new versions, because they can be a little bit problematic. So we try to get a version that's a little bit 6 months old, and then we put it on Sahara. I think the latest one for Embody is 2.6. We do support older ones. We support 2.2, 2.3, and 3.4 as well, and the new one, 2.6. But we do that exercise every cycle. We go to all the plugins that we support and try to get the version that's at least 6 months old on Sahara, which is a little bit more stable than the latest release.
I think one of the use cases we have for looking at something like Sahara is, so we have a Hortonworks distribution that was built by folks that are no longer with our company, so a lot of that knowledge walked out the door, and it's maintaining this download implementation at our company is difficult. We can get people to do it, but a lot of these, like having Hadoop as a service, where you can have projects come in and potentially do big data work without needing to shell out now I need to go hire somebody to curate the environment for me. Make sure I have currency with what I'm doing. There's a lot of value here in being able to leverage Hadoop as a service. And so the only thing that's kind of sticking in my head is that I know that maintaining currency with what the newer version is of what Hortonworks is putting in there, like one through 3.1, for example, where do you see, or how far behind do you see something like Sahara would be the latest Hortonworks distro?
I think the usual way that we measure that is we don't try to be too far behind, because we know that people want to use the newest things all the time, and that's always exciting to get the new version and everything. But from a project that depends on third-party projects like we do, it's not always safe for us to get the newest thing. So for example, I think it was last cycle we tried to get MapR, and we're looking for the newest version. I think it was MapR, and no, I think it was Hadoop. And they had just like released one version 2 weeks before the day they were looking for the newer version to put on Sahara. So for us, it's a little bit dangerous to get that newer version, because that version was just released 2 weeks ago. It's definitely going to have a bunch of problems on it. It's definitely going to get new minor releases on it. And for us to keep going back and seeing all that is kind of complicated. So we usually are about 6 months behind. And that's the window that we try to keep. If it's possible, we try to, so if MapR released a 6 version, so 6.0, and it's really stable, people are testing, and it's working for about a month or two, then we try to get their version on Sahara. But if it's just too new, then we don't risk it, because it just can, it's not worth the effort to keep going back and updating, because it was just not working from the plugin side. So, but we try not to go too late.
Is it the community that works on the plugins, or do you get support from like Hortonworks on the environment?
Right now, only the community. Yeah, we have no support from. We used to, but we don't anymore.
Okay. So, I guess one of the things is that now, like not having deployed Sahara is kind of learning about this now. Like, is this like when you deploy a cluster? I mean, as the operator, do you get to decide like this is going to leverage Nova for virtual machines, or going to leverage Ironic for bare metal deployments? Is that all configurable?
Yep, on Sahara we can use both virtual machines and bare metal. So if you have bare metal support on your OpenStack infrastructure, yep, you can deploy Sahara using bare metal nodes as well, and virtual machines again as well.
And if your distribution supports like GPU uploading and bare metal, that's something that you're rolled in as a preference?
I don't think we don't do GPU preferences. We don't go that deep into configuration, but I think this is more of a Nova responsibility. And if you can get Nova to do that, Sahara is just going to go with it, because we throw all the responsibility to Nova. So all the virtual machine management it goes to Nova or bare metal to Ironic. So we don't do that configuration on our side, but if you do on their side, then Sahara is going to pick it up. And I can't answer any more questions because we're out of time, but we can just talk on the way out for sure. So thanks again, everybody, for showing up, and hopefully you're going to use Sahara for the next